Hello and welcome. Our webinar will be beginning shortly. I'm going to just wait just a minute for everybody to start getting in. I'll go ahead and do some of the entry things now. Give me one moment. Okay, welcome to today's webinar, Diversity and Disparity in Leadership in Safety, Construction, and Consulting, presented by Crystal Turner-Moffatt. A few housekeeping items first. You will be muted during this presentation. If you would like to ask a question, please enter it into the online Q&A box. We will save time at the end of the presentation to address as many questions as possible. This presentation is being recorded and will be made available on the Center for Occupational and Environmental Health YouTube page and on our website. All participants who logged in with their registration email for the full live presentation today will receive an email tomorrow with a link to the evaluation form that will qualify participants for a certificate of completion worth 1 continuing education contact hour. Once the evaluation is completed, you'll be able to access and print your certificate. I would like to take a moment to introduce our speaker. Crystal is a certified expert in construction, environmental, and occupational health and safety, or EOHS, and a leadership and possibility coach, trainer, author, speaker, panelist, and professional consultant in the field of EHS. She's the safety diva because EHS is her passion. As an EHS subject matter expert, she has worked on multifaceted environments for over 25 years. Raised in Harlem, New York, Crystal has broken down the barriers in the safety and construction industry. As a woman of color working in a male-dominated field, Crystal is proud to be a trailblazer. Crystal is the CEO of CDT EHS Consulting, LLC, an MWBE firm established in 2007. As a bridge to safety success, CDT EHS Consulting and Safety Divas Academy offer expert and passionate consultation. Crystal is a PhD student at the Capital Technology University and also studied for her Master of Science at Hunter College in EOHS. She has a BA in psychology from Wesleyan University and a bioterrorism preparedness certificate from Hunter College at CUNY. Crystal authored The Power of Mentorship, Strengthening in Leadership Roles, and is a professional member of ASSP, AIHA, and founding board member of the USC BWB US Coalition of Black Women Businesses, advocating for the power of social health and economic equality. I just join everybody here at COEH in saying thank you and welcome, and I'll go ahead and let you take it from here.
Thank you, Jazz, for that warm introduction. And good afternoon, everyone, morning, wherever you're coming from. Beautiful day today. And we're going to be looking at diversity and disparity in leadership and safety in the construction and consulting field. And this data that I'm going to share with you is coming from my preliminary study for my dissertation at Capital Technology University, as Jess said. And I'm just glad to be with you today. So I've been looking at the access and barriers and success of African American women and entrepreneurs, consultants, professionals, and business owners in the construction industry and safety field. Because basically, it's been, what can I say, like being out here and getting to the place where I am right now, there's been some barriers to success and just not finding a lot of African American women in this field. And so that sparked me to say, like, maybe I should look at this as a topic for study, because it's not a lot known about why that is. So I'm looking at the contribution of disparities, the impact of STEM education, diversity, equity, inclusion, and the economic, sociocultural, wealth, age, and gender gaps, and institutional or systemic barriers to success. And this is a preliminary study. So as it has said that this webinar is going to explore the impact of historical, sociocultural, economic inequalities on the percentage of African American women entrepreneurs in the safety, construction, and consulting field. And I've been doing a qualitative and quantitative analysis of the data, and I've kind of leveraged that to see why discrepancies exist in our numbers and examine the current conditions in the United States, and I'm looking to offer possible solutions to mitigate these disparities. So At the completion of this webinar, you'll be able to describe some historical context of choosing a STEM career, why young African-American girls and or women should be doing that if they want to get into the safety field, discuss the social impact of diversity, equity, inclusion, and the choices of African-American women in this type of leadership role, identify economic, market, social, cultural, and institutional barriers faced by African-American women and business owners throughout the business building process that they go through, and examine the role of mentors, sponsors, and advocates. Because there's a difference. A mentor, really gives you that knowledge and a step up in what you know, but an advocate is really there for you in the C-suite, in the boardroom, advocating for you in your leadership role and getting into C-suite roles. So the impact of choices that African-American women entrepreneurs make, particularly in aspect to C-suite positions and ownership within the construction industry, is really important to have not only mentors, but sponsors. And I'm going to describe some of the economic impact of COVID-19 that women of color are facing and the quantity of their consulting business compared to their white counterparts. So, as I said, we're looking at the access and barriers of success. So across the United States, why do so few African Americans, let alone African American women, own their own consulting or safety businesses in a field like construction? And like I said, I'm looking at the social, cultural, economic, and institutional barriers to that. And women entrepreneurs, we have been making strides lately, and our numbers are on the rise. But there's still a disparity between the number of African-American women in this field and their white counterparts. And such a disparity adversely affects the economy of the United States. African-American women entrepreneurs, we face barriers in our business development. And also there's not enough data on African-American women in this business sector. In addition, there's not a lot known as to why the professional, scientific, and technical service industry in this field of construction is characterized by gender, race, age, and wealth disparities. So like I said, I'm looking at it qualitatively and quantitatively, and historically looking at education, social culture, barriers and economic impacts of this inequality on the percentage of African-American women professionals in this field and in the construction field. And I'm just aiming to answer the questions about why this discrepancy exists, as well as the current state in the United States. And the findings, my hope is that it'll be used to suggest potential solutions to mitigate and improve this disparity. So the purpose, like I said, is to explore and expound on existing research, of course, and look at the lived experience of African-American women entrepreneurs, professionals, and safety consultants in the construction business. So just a little literature review and background. When we look at STEM, the majority of Blacks in STEM jobs have experienced discrimination at work. The percent of those in the science and engineering and math jobs say they've experienced discrimination at work due to their race or ethnicity. And this discrimination is based on combined responses to 8 items according to Pew Research Center, and whites, Blacks, Asians, and non-Hispanics only were used in this study. Hispanics were of any race, and respondents who gave their responses who did not give an answer are not shown in this data here. And this was based on women and men in STEM often are at odds and workplace equality. So a McKinsey report that was in 2019 on delivering through diversity, it really explored the business case, right, that brings this unique perspective on how to address inequality and diversity and to improve growth and performance in the workplace. So they looked at a business case, and they looked at, having inequality and diversity, and they found that diversity is linked to increased business performance. So in summary, a more diverse leadership team leads to better financial performance. And they concluded that. And there was a correlation between more diverse leadership team and financial outperformance. And it was shown 3 years ago that this remained intact on a global, augmented, and updated data set. And roles in leadership is really important. The top performing companies in terms of gender diversity on executive teams had 21% greater profitability, as well as 27% greater value creation. More women were employed in line as far as generating revenue, and roles in executive teams were the most profitable when they were diverse. And companies were also more profitable. Gender is not the only factor, but the industry-leading profitability of these companies was with ethnic cultural diversity on the executive team, and that was 33% higher. So as a result of this relationship between diversity and inclusion, and with people, as well as, going beyond age, gender, and generational gaps, they can really be a key differentiator for companies. And they concluded that in 2018. And in January 2021, the US Census Bureau released that new estimates on employee characteristics across all US businesses, that 18.3%, or about 1 million, are minority owned, and 19.9% of 1.1 million were owned by women. And they had this annual business survey that they did, and they covered this and for the year 2018 and the 2020 census. So more women are becoming entrepreneurs today. So the outlook is getting better. And there's more minority-owned businesses, and they account for 50% of all the women-owned businesses. The revenue and what they account for is 6.4 million businesses. And minority-owned business sector is responsible for 50% of all the women's business revenue and represents 6.4 million companies. Okay, moving on. So women-owned businesses grew, just so for some background, 5% between 2018 and 2019, and then minority businesses grew 10%. And moreover, Black female-owned businesses grew by 12% compared to 8% in previous years. So women of color have entered into this business world at rates much higher than non-minority women since 2014. And according to American Express study, the number of women-owned businesses was up 5.6% from 2014 to 2019. And in the United States, the 4 largest sectors responsible for that are the professional, scientific, and technical services, construction, healthcare, and social assistance, and retail trade. So it was estimated that 2.8 million businesses were in this group and employed 51.1 million people, having a payroll of about 2.6 trillion per year. So women of color, unfortunately, are underrepresented in this sector, especially in the US, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2021. There were fewer than 1 in 10, or 9.4% African-American owned firms in the US, and but less than 1 in 20, 4.7% were in construction. And the percentage of African-American owned firms in construction was less than 1%. And that's like $11.1 billion. So in 2012, the percentage for these industries, that was like was close to percentage for these industries combined. So I'm gonna just, here we go, skip ahead a little bit here. So the purpose of, right here. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, again in 2020, 10.9% of construction workers were women, and only 6.6% were African American. So among businesses in this sector, 7.4% were Black. So while African American females are making strides and their numbers are on the rise, there's still that disparity in their representation in this sector. And this has a large impact on the economy, as I said before. And having minority women-owned firms match the revenue of white women-owned businesses will create 4 million new jobs and $981 billion in revenue. And this is according to American Express. So having African-American women entrepreneurs in this field, there's obstacles that are faced. And furthermore, there's not a lot of data on women in the sector, and little is known about the reasons for this gender, race, wealth gap in the professional, scientific, and technical service industry in the construction field. So the purpose, like I said, is that we just increase the number of women, and that means that 42% of all the companies that are owned and controlled and managed or managed by at least 51% women, and there are over 2.3 million companies owned equally by men and women, accounting for 49% of businesses and employing 14% of the workforce. The number of female entrepreneurs or sidepreneurs has increased by 39%. And this suggests that more women see part-time entrepreneurship as a way to pay bills, build wealth, or follow their passion. And that's really what I did, like follow my passion for safety. That's what got me here, is just following the risk for construction workers being the workers that are highest hit in incidents and accidents and fatalities, and just following my passion for seeing that people are taken care of. So female founders are steadily breaking down barriers to start and run successful companies, and the growth rate is more than double of all that of other businesses. So despite these strides, like I said, there's still a disparity, and a lot more jobs and money could be created and wealth could be generated. So entrepreneurship and business ownership is really, particularly community-based businesses, are crucial to creating community wealth for trade proprietors and those that they employ. And according to the McKinsey report, again, Black-owned businesses are a key component of closing the Black-white wealth gap. And the McKinsey report also projects that this will cost the economy $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion per year by 2028. So regardless, the COVID-19 emergency, of course, has put a further strain on Black businesses, and it may cause this racial wealth gap to widen. So by achieving some income equality between Black and white-owned businesses, as well as helping small and medium-sized businesses with non-white owners, there's a $290 billion growing opportunity for the advancement of general wealth. So that's why this is so important, is this affects everyone. It's not just about, just the gap for having more diversity and inclusion in the field, but it's for everyone. Okay. So the ability for Black Americans to reap the benefits of business ownership has never been equal. And only 5% of Black Americans hold business equity compared to 15% of white Americans. So Black Americans have had this business equity worth about 50% of Americans and a third of white Americans. So as a result of COVID-19, that racially charged violence that we had in 2020 as well, some large companies are now supporting Black-owned businesses, and it's on the rise. And we all know that it's like diversity, equity, inclusion is like, the flavor of the day right now, but we have to just keep that momentum going. But one thing, there's still that disparity. And when you look at safety, the US Bureau of Labor Statistics actually did one of the first studies in a while where they actually looked at health and safety as a career. And we found that only 1.6% of the 85,000 occupational health and safety specialists and technicians in the entire country were Black in 2020. And health and safety was recognized as an occupation for the first time. So they just started doing this research on health and safety. So in 2021, there was a rise to about 13% out of a decrease of 72,000 occupational health and safety specialists and technicians. So it would be worth really focusing on these reasons for these changes and how the numbers of these people employed in this field, especially Black Americans, can increase as a percentage over time. So this was actually the numbers in 2020. Total employed and occupational health and safety specialists and technicians was 85,000. As you see, 35.8% were women, 90.3% were white, and 1.6% African American, 2.9% Asian, and Hispanic or Latino was 11.7%. And then we see in 2021, even though total employed decreased, the numbers have increased a little bit, but it's still a large disparity for Black or African Americans in this field. So the goal of the study that I had, it was to address these important questions: why these discrepancies exist, and as well as discover that this current state of affairs in the U.S. So when you look at minority leaders And, leadership is very important in safety, right? Female entrepreneurship is becoming a lot less white, as I said, and minority women are controlling 44% of the women-owned businesses in the United States. And that's up from 20% in 1997, according to the census data. So this is the survey. Basically what I did was I accessed social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, email surveys, and I used SurveyMonkey to get my results. And I actually collected data from 65 women. The survey itself asked questions about the access. I introduced myself and told them the purpose of the study. And there were qualifying questions so that I only had data from African-American women over 18 years of age. And they gave basic information. And did they identify as Black or African-American? Did they identify as a woman? And also, had they had at least 2 years of their own business that was, recognized by the IRS, and did they have 5 or more years experience as a safety professional, safety entrepreneur, safety consultant, or construction business owner. So if they answered all these questions yes, then they were taken to the survey. If not, they were disqualified and just thanked for their participation. So after discussing the purpose of the study, the first question was, are you a member of any business association or organization? And if they were, we asked for a referral source for more data, because the goal in the future is to access some more organizations that are Black American women, specialty organizations, to access more of a pool of sample people to sample. So just the source of where they found out about the survey. And I focused a lot on LinkedIn leads, and the goal was to have a focus group. I didn't have enough time at this stage for the study to have a focus group, but I did some interviews. And the plan is also to do a case study on some very famous construction women like Cheryl McKizzak and some other women that I've been looking at how they achieved safety success. And if I can get an interview, I've asked some very busy women, but that's one of the goals in the future, to do case studies and focus groups. So I asked them what was their highest level of educational attainment, what was their highest level, to look at their access to STEM education. That was asked as well. If they had also any plans in the future for furthering their education, and just some demographic information. And why did they decide to become an entrepreneur, safety consultant, professional, or business owner? And if they owned a business, what percentage of the business did they own? At least 51%, so it would be a minority women-owned business, or if they owned 100%. And what type of business they own, and in what sector, i.e. was it professional, technical, scientific, or construction? And what was their position in the company? And were they a member of any business associations? And did they have any special licenses or certifications? And if yes, like what it was? They were what prompted their decision to start their own consulting business and or seek being a safety professional? And what have been some of the wins and losses in their business or profession? What were the main challenges they faced? And if they were to reflect, what lessons did they learn from these experiences? And let me move this over here so I can see a little better. Here we go. So knowing what they know now, I asked them, would they, if they had it to do over again, would they do anything differently? And what education, training, or work experience or personal experiences helped them access the safety profession or transition to self-employment as a consultant or construction business owner? What business hurdles, crises, constraints, or transitions occurred during the initial phase of their business consulting employment? And what personal hurdles, crises, or transitions occurred during the initial phase of their employment or business? How did they manage or circumvent these barriers? Okay. And then lastly about STEM, did they choose a STEM education, something in science, math, technical area, or engineering? If they answer yes, did they start out at less than 10 years old, from 11 to 18 years old, 19 to 30, 31 to 40 years old? Was it later in life, 41 to 50 years old, or 51 to 65 plus? And if they answer no, why did they not choose STEM education? And did they face any barriers in accessing or not accessing their education? And what was the social cultural impact of diversity, equity, inclusion on the choices they made as an African American woman to have the type of leadership role in the construction consulting industry? Had they had a mentor? If yes, what was the impact of that mentor? And did they have a sponsor or advocate? If yes, what was the impact of that sponsor on the business of professional success? And throughout their business building professional growth process, what type of economic challenges as an African-American woman and a business owner, as a safety consultant, did they face throughout their building process? What kind of social cultural challenges? So first, we looked at economics, looked at social cultural. Like I said, I wanted to look at and whether their gender had any impact. Did they face anything because of their gender? Then I asked about race and ethnicity. It's the same question, what types of challenges they had. And regardless of their age, did they experience anything that hindered them and gave them access? And do they believe that the challenges they face were linked or associated with any racial discrimination in the US? Was their business affected by the economic downturn, recession during COVID? Was there anything particularly like to share regarding their business professional experiences during the pandemic or anything COVID related? And then anything about their family history, because sometimes, there's access. Like for me, I come from a family of entrepreneurs. My grandfather, my grandfather had a tool and die business and several businesses. And my grandmother was a seamstress. And then my mom, she carried through, and she even though she worked as a secretary in the legal field, she did her own administrative work. My dad was a credit and collections counselor. So once you kind of have that entrepreneurial buzz in your family, it's the transition to be an entrepreneur, the mindset is there. So I asked them about relationships, their family history, social relationships, and professional networks. Like what impact was that on and just them starting a business? And what did they value the relationship and networks in starting and sustaining their business? And to what extent did these relationships and professional network contribute to their business career? Then I asked for some examples if they were willing, and what benefits they got from these relationships, and what the most significant value that they have derived from being part of a professional network. How has being part of a social cultural network and maintaining those relationships enabled them to achieve their goals and building their business status? And the last part was, how has race, class, gender, and or sexuality played in their ability to succeed as an entrepreneur, consultant, or construction business owner, or safety professional? Did they think that male entrepreneurs had a different access to social and professional networks and resources? Did they think that white entrepreneurs and professionals in the construction business had a different access to networks and resources? And did male business owners run businesses differently and have different benefits because of their social professional network and resources? And did white run businesses benefit differently from social professional networks and resources? And then I asked them how many hours they spent in their business. Was it less than 40 or more than 40 or about 40 hours? What advice they would give to someone who's trying to grow a safety business or be a professional in the consulting field or a construction owner? And is there anything they would like to add about their business, job, or profession they feel would be meaningful to the study to benefit others? So if they would like to be interviewed virtually or take place in a focus group that regarding the topic. And this is just a disqualification page of the survey that someone did not qualify on those first 5 questions. So question 1, everybody was over 18 years of age. That was 100%, so no one skipped that question. Then we had So we had 100% of responses. Did you identify as Black or African American? Everybody answered, and you can see the percentages right here. A little quick there. 72% was yes, and 27%, approximately 28% was no. And you identify as a woman, majority said yes, that's why they qualified, and those that answered no, which was 7.7% of the 65 people, went on to answer the next question. Have you started and maintained your own IRS legitimized safety business or consulting construction business with 2 or more years? Or other type of business? So most people had said no, they hadn't actually had their own business for 2 or more years. And the percentage of yes and then none of the above was 6%. Yes said 33%, no was 56.9%. And that kind of started to dwindle the sample pool of people in the study. So if you didn't have your own business, then I asked that you have 2 or more years of experience as a professional entrepreneur, safety consultant, or construction business owner. Majority of them did say yes to that. We had 10%, 40 people said yes, and 27.69% said no. Nobody skipped that question. One of the things I did find was that, I did let everyone know that I did ask a lot of questions, and I probably will temper and look at the questions I've asked for future study and see why, some people will choose to skip or not sit down and come back. I made the study so that they can sit down and do it in stages and not answer all the questions and come back and lose their data. So just made some adjustments along the way. So what was the highest level of educational attainment? And this is really interesting. So they were bachelors, and then most people, had bachelors, and then we had the middle with a master's and then some PhDs. So that was 44% of those that answered. The master's was 33% and the PhD was 22.22%. And what were your intentions or plans for a degree in the future? And most people had no plans, and some did want to go for their master's or their PhD. And so if you own the business, what percentage of the business did you own? And most of them that did, they owned their business 100%. And were they a member of a business association or professional organization? 8 people answered, and they said yes, they were. And did they have any specific licenses or certifications? 87% said yes. So that was really an impact. And I know for me, that's been the thing about, whether you get the education or you get your certifications. Ideally, both is great, but certifications really do bump you up in the safety field, because you really have to walk the walk and talk the talk, and you can have the book knowledge, but not having the field experience or being able to have the certification sometimes does hinder you, but it does actually definitely put you in another level of safety and construction. So out of those answered, most of them were yes. And as an African-American business owner, did you choose STEM education? 66% said yes, 1 said no. And when did they choose it? Less than 10 years old, and some were 11 to 18 years old. Did you start your STEM education? And that's really ideal, because the more you can get to young women and at an early age, they have an earlier chance of really getting into the sciences. Have you had a mentor? Everyone who did answer towards this end of the study, we're about halfway through the survey now, said yes, they had a mentor. And did they have a sponsor? One was 2 were yes and 1 was no. Usually people don't know about having sponsors, but they do know about having mentors. So like I said, that's your advocate. And do you believe the challenges you face are linked or associated with racial discrimination in the United States? When it got to this point, those that did answer said yes, and others said no, which was about 30-something percent, 33.33%. So was your business affected by the downturn in COVID recession? Yes, it was. And do you think that male entrepreneurs and safety professionals have different access? Everyone said yes. And do you think that entrepreneurs and safety professionals, owners have different access to social professional networks and resources? If you're a male, they agree with that. Do you think that construction business owners that are white have a different access? And they said yes. And do male-run businesses benefit differently? Yes. And do white-run businesses benefit differently? So these were some of the key questions that I picked out. And did they benefit from social professional networks and resources? So how many hours do you work on a week on your job? And most people were over 40 hours, safety people working hard. And would you be primarily interested in being interviewed? They were extremely interested, very interested, somewhat interested, and a few not at all. So that's a key for follow-up with those that are interested to do focus groups or a virtual focus group and take part in the study further. So these were just some statistics, just preliminarily. Like I said, we had these are percentages. You identify basically a repeat of I did it statistically using statistical software just to look and see if there was any other trends. So when they said the other business besides safety, they went to architectural business or public safety consulting. And did you have 2 or more years of experience? Like I had said, like 40 people said yes, 18 said no, and none of the above. So some of the associations that people were members of were the AIA, Alignable, American Counseling Association of Maryland, the ASCE, Literary Leaders Council, Black Women in Construction, National Association of Black Women in Construction, ASSP, Y. I'm a member of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, Minority Supplier, NASP, ASSP, and NATMI, Green Business Network, the U.S. Black Chamber of President's Council, and a gathering of Black women entrepreneurs, NBI. And one of the things that I did want to look forward to doing in the future is reach out to some organizations and have their participants take part. So this is my preliminary, like, capstone type of project. And age, the frequency of age. So people, it's like were well diverse in the age that answered. And the fields were, frequencies were architecture, construction, consulting, e-commerce, mental health, public safety, and safety. Years of experience range from 2 to 33 plus. And the company size they work for, some were 1, 3, 6,000, 8 to 10 employees, an environmental consultant with 10. And that was the company size. 25, small, solopreneur. And like I said, the highest level of education. And architect with some other professional leadership roles, CEO, deputy commissioner of staff, founder, president, psychotherapist, safety leadership coach. So empowering the underprivileged, when I asked like any additional information they like to share, they said that was a passion that fuels them to move forward. They like to share this being an entrepreneur and owner being a Fin-powered LLC. So why did you decide to become an entrepreneur safety consultant or construction business owner? And one person said, being an entrepreneur gives them the flexibility and time to help others achieve their individual success as well. Flexibility and freedom. So we see a pattern, flexibility of expression and wealth creation. I decided to become an entrepreneur consultant because I wanted to empower other women like myself to stand in their power, to carve out a space to showcase our talents and abilities. I wanted to have the flexibility and opportunity to network without limitations. I was unable to locate a job at the desired pay rate. It was the next step in my career as an architect. And the pandemic made me realize that I had been disempowering myself and my ambitions. And I was bored at my previous jobs, and I had grown tired of jumping through others' hoops. All right, so 8% of those, 12.3%, like 100% of basically everyone said that they had owned of the people who answered at this stage said they own their own business 100%. So what type of business do you own, and in what sector? And we had the construction, general contracting, demolition, e-commerce, environmental consulting, construction and education, a strategy consulting practice that helps businesses scale, and specific focuses on BIPOC run businesses. But I'm trying to make my way into ventures. Professional consultant, certified fitness and motivational speaker, professional LLC, and professional services. And what is your role? CEO, president, owner? And are you a member of any organizations? That was yes. And do you have any certifications? That was, let me go back. That was asbestos supervisor certifications, group fitness instructor, fire department, OSHA, CSP, digital management, general engineering, project management, registered architect in New Jersey and New York. So what prompted you to aspire to start your own consulting construction business and seek the safety profession? Just needed experience. I enjoy construction industry, and I knew I could make a positive impact. I always had a creative eye for things. As I worked my 9 to 5, I felt like I had more in me to give. So I started to work with businesses freelance, helping them optimize and scale. And that inevitably was the way I got started with my with what inspired me to go was the pandemic and going all in. I knew that I had a lot to offer. The agency who cared enough wanted the perspective of a Black woman, and I'm also certified in equal employment opportunity investigations. All right, so what have been the wins and losses? It's been expertise contracts. It's hard to find mentors in the space, and articulating your vision appropriately to gain the leads possible. I think that dealing with imposter syndrome is still one of the biggest things I encounter. And in terms of losses in general, just bad deals with clients that and partners that I learned too late not to trust. Wins have definitely been my clients' satisfaction with my services and their referrals. Wins have been learning the process of building a business, and the losses have been hesitating to act out goals. And lastly, wins have been promised the first Black female to command a troop in the history of our agency. Wins, me being promoted as the first Black female to attain the rank of deputy commissioner. And the losses, our agency currently has only 6% population of color. A loss is our agency only has 6% population of women. All right, so I'm going to some of the main things they faced: racism, financial frequencies. When you reflect on lessons you learn, I'm sorry, it's like so small here, but that yeah, that they were able to learn about licensing and others. And I think I have this later on. So let me just, I'm going to go to just a minute to go to the slides at the end so I can share that with you. Here we go. All right. So this is just another way to express the data that I had. And let's look at the time for a second. Mhm. Thank you. So basically, like I said, I really have just like scratched the surface about where these women, how this whole area can be explored, and looking for just the focus groups to learn more, the case studies to learn more, and have time for questions about what I've experienced.
Hello, hello, and thank you again, Crystal. That was wonderful. Again, if anybody would like to ask a question, go ahead and type it now into the Q&A box, and I will ask those live. I'm also joined by our one of our awesome students here at UC Berkeley, Tyra Parrish. So Tyra, if you want to come on the camera, you're more than welcome to.
Hi,
So,
everyone. Oh, sorry. Just
go
saying
ahead.
hi, Tyra. Nice to meet y'all.
Okay, and so Crystal, what do you
Yes.
think is your greatest takeaway from all of your research so far? I know that you have a lot, more to do, and it's in its
Yeah.
phases. But what is your best, like, I guess your greatest takeaway and the thing that maybe taught you something, even though you've kind of already been through the experience?
Yeah, that one of my takeaways I really got is that even though, facing barriers, when you really, um think about it, like working for yourself, being an entrepreneur, um, it's a saying that goes that profits are better than wages. You're able to be profitable in yourself, creating your own wealth. Because when we work for other people, it may be like a secure thing, but it's like you have give 40 years of your life sometimes. And then, when it's time to retire, it's like, what do you have? This gives you, when I went looking for like something and I've been talking to, seeing these women's reactions, it's like, it's just an empowerment. That's what I see as a total level of empowerment, being an entrepreneur, being, especially in a field that's male dominated, that, just seeing so many people making strides and despite the barriers that they face. That's what I got as a real takeaway, that if you just persevere, you just get a level of empowerment. Yes, you work harder hours, you may, work longer, but it's for you, and I think that's what I really was my takeaway. Yeah, and having the resources, definitely networking, definitely, being part of networking. So having a sponsor, all those things, and access to organizations that are going to support you. And like I said, really starting out young and younger and getting into being a mentor and also giving access to these young people to STEM education. I actually this year became a BCSP, which is the Board of Certified Safety Professional Ambassador. So I'll be going out to schools and at conferences and just spreading the word about certification for being a safety professional. And I think this is really important because not a lot of people know about the field. That's one of the reasons why people don't get into it. Something some people find out later on in life. So that's why I'm so glad we have, Center for Occupational, Environmental Health and places where, people can learn more about the field.
Great, thank you so much. We have a couple questions. The first one is possibly something you can answer, but one of our participants just asked if you can maybe explain what you think happened with the skipped answers in the participant.
Yeah. Well, once I kind of, like I said, I went back and rebooted and realized that it was a lot for people to answer in one sitting. So, and people were disqualified by the amount of time they had on their business. So, and people were coming on and the disqualification process. So I'm going to look at just the survey and skipping answers that, even though I required some answers, they were able to skip answers. So, And that maybe this goes to show you, it's like there's not a lot of, people in this field of women, African-American women of color. And that's the purpose for me doing it, is that, I'm gonna try to access more organizations and more people, and reach out and I have a longer time this time to really access the sample. But I have interviews lined up, and just people referring to me to other women. And yeah, it's just not a lot of us. So the fact that I got 65 people to even consider taking the survey, I was happy. But yeah, that's something I'm going to work on. And it takes a lot of thought. So with the interview, I did an hour interview so far with 2 women, and the interview was the same questions, but it gives a different perspective, and you have more intimate time. And I think the focus groups also, on virtual focus group, will allow me to gain more data too, as far as the qualitative and the barriers that these women have faced, and they know what they're committed to ahead of time. It's going to take an hour for the interview or the focus group to ask them the questions. So I think that was the surprise, that the survey was about a half an hour, 60 questions, even though they go by quick, especially if you're conscientious and you want to take, some of those people that did those answers that really were thought-provoking, that this is just preliminary data, but it might be more suited to just do the focus groups and have the interviews and from a set of women, and be able to go more in depth.
Thank you. And I think, Tyra, you have a question?
Yeah, and it's actually about the focus group, so I'm glad that you were talking about it. I was kind of curious to, in regards to the focus group, do you see it being run by just a general interviewer, or somebody else who happens to be a Black woman in the field? And I know you talked about wanting to get really meaningful quotes from it, but do you also see
bias, like, yeah.
Oh, sorry, can you hear me?
You were saying like a bias for, like, who would I get to be an interviewer? Yeah, I have a whole,
exactly. Yeah.
I have a whole script, and because I can't do everything. I won't be at that point, right? But I have a whole script and a whole process for the focus groups and for the interviews, that people give their consent, and they know what it's about. So that the answers, how it's going to be used, how the data is going to be used. So, that's moving forward in the next phase, that I'll be able to do that. So yes, you're right. Like having a diverse interviewer besides just me, with like having like someone else, do the questions. And since I'm so close to the topic, that would be a great idea. I can see that benefiting it.
And we have a couple more questions here. I want to try to get to them before anybody has to leave.
Okay.
The first question is, can you speak a little bit more on the impact of mentoring? Have you personally had a mentor or acted as a mentor? And are there many mentoring opportunities available? And if so, are there anything that you could recommend to the audience today?
Oh yes, that's one of my other specialties. I did an article, I wrote an article in the ASSP Journal on leadership as and mentorship as an access for leadership for women and in the field. And one of the main things I have found, and then I've done also talks at Safepedia and other places on actually from that mentorship to that sponsorship. So what I would say is definitely, I've had a mentor, I've mentored, I've had mentees through ASSC, through WISE and BISE programs, and they also poured into me as much as I, as a mentor, I got something from them and their vitality and their passion for the field and what they were into. So yes, like I said, that mentor gives you like knowledge. They can be like a buttress for you, a support for you to learn more and to get into the field and to really, as you're a growing professional. That the sponsor is an advocate. The sponsor is somebody who they're in those board meetings and they're in the field practicing, and where you might not be able to tread, they can speak highly for you. So I would suggest seeking out mentorship programs through professional organizations or wherever you can find in your workplace if they have them. Also, look for sponsors. And how you do that is you volunteer for projects for someone that may be at a higher level at your job or where you are, and you look for projects where you can help them with, so they can put in a good word for you when the next thing comes along. They're your advocate.
Thank you. I think Tyra has the next question.
Yes, so the next question is, what impact does the presence of these women have in the field, and what were some common negative experiences that you saw throughout the survey?
Yeah, the common negative experiences and the stuff is something I've faced as well, is that like someone mentioned, facades of conformity, right? And that is like having to do something that you wouldn't normally do, or hide something, or be different, because diversity just isn't something that's the tapestry of your organization. So, it happened for me. I cut my hair and decided to go natural, and I wasn't invited to the board meeting that I was supposed to be, part of a team. And it really took me back, and I was like, wow, something to like expressing yourself, physically with your hair or something like that. You have to be somebody or not. So yeah, it was expressed that, people faced things like that. Sorry about that. Didn't turn the WhatsApp up. And yeah, and also just having access to business development funding, and having access to capital to start the business and to keep it going. That was another thing, business development wise. But yes, just having that culture, not only a safety culture, but a D&I culture at your organization. Knowing that sometimes you're like the only face that's going to be there, and how you're going to make that work some places. When you look around, I looked around and I didn't see any certified safety professionals where I was. I went to ASSP and went to the conference and networked and to find other people of color and women of color, because I didn't see anyone around. And as far as safety is concerned, and occupational health, I think that nothing against men, but women have an innate nurturing ability. And I think we're really good in the field. We're really good at safety, and more of us should do it. And a partnership is really good. Usually men and women partner well together in safety. It's like a natural thing. And there's not so much of a drawing the line in the sand with one safety guy, and a gentleman at a job site. I think we work well together.
We have a couple more questions. So the next question is, given your research, what advice do you have for African-American women in these fields or trying to get in? So I know you mentioned the mentor and the sponsors, but outside of that, for people who may not have access to that, are there any other pathways that you recommend?
Well, one thing about safety that I love is that not everybody wants to go to college or grad school, or or get a PhD in a science or something. The one thing about the construction field, through certification, you can get your OSHA 30, and you can get your OSHA 500, or you can get, certifications in the field in different aspects. And that can drive you into a very lucrative career if you follow it through safety. And then, construction, look at the infrastructure bill and how money is starting to flow down now towards construction. So I would say one good thing about the field is that it is growing. Professionals are growing. But you can get certification as well as education that will get you further. But one thing about it is that with some trade school, or with certifications in the field, you can actually have a great career. So I would say network, join some organizations, do your research on where you want to go. Look for a company that has a great culture, and if you want a challenge, maybe you can change the culture somewhere else by what you do.
Okay, and we have one more question. It's a pretty long one, but the question is, do you think this survey reveals which factors, relationship mentors, exposure to the field as a youth, or other factors are more important in ensuring the success of women POC business owners? Do you have any thoughts on how we as a community can make these factors more accessible to women POCs?
Very good question. Well, one reason why I helped to found the U.S. Coalition of Black Women Businesses is to eventually, have a mentoring program, have a program where we can reach out to young women. It's already like, difficult with us networking with each other. So, definitely more organizations for young women. I know a couple of like mentoring in medicine and a couple of other organizations, the rites of passage programs, anything that gets people, especially young women, involved in the sciences, in math, in the STEM, young men of color, but especially women of color, because it's like a stigma, right? You're like a nerd if you like science, or you're like a this, you like, but if you really make it fun, realize they can have a great career and have fun at it, and do something that's not just a job, that is. And then if you take it to the entrepreneur level, then you're like your own, your own boss, able to generate wealth and income. And I think that's important, to have that mindset. It all starts with changing the mindset. So the earlier we reach the minds, then we can change the mindset earlier.
Thank you again so much. Thank you to Tyra. Thank you to Crystal. Thank you to everybody who came today and really gave us some of your time and participated. I will send tomorrow a copy of, a link to the recording and an evaluation form so that everybody can get their certificate as needed, so get those CEs. And then also, if we have any resources or anything that we can send along, we'll add those to the website for you. But I just want to take a moment to thank Crystal again for coming here and just, really, devoting some of your time to this cause that's so important, and really looking forward to see where this leads us, and adding more people to the pool of OEHS practitioners. It's going to be a beautiful thing. And yeah, so
yes, look forward to me until 2023.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, I know you have to come back and give us some more updates as you get them. So thank you again.
Yes, and thank you to CapTech U for the president shouting me out today to have people come on. All right, it was a pleasure being with all of you, and thank you for inviting me to do this.
Of course,
as always. Pleasure. Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.